One factor into today's video, going to have a look at the weather next 8 to 10 days. In today's video, this takes us to around middle of May, up to towards the 15th of the month. So going off in towards the middle part of the month. It looks like it's going to be pretty unsettled. We may get a brief burst of warmer weather early next week. I don't think it'll last though, because the jet stream is fairly strong actually, perhaps unusually strong for this time of the year. So if we do get a brief burst of warmth early next week, it could bring on thunder because it's quite an unstable pattern and then it'll very quickly cool off. Well, that's how it looks this morning. But have a look at the charts in a moment. Before I get on, in fact, just to say about the ads, there's links to articles on the pages at GasUp.com. Have a browse through the widgets, any articles that you're interested in, please click through. There's also video ads on those pages. They open up with the content. After you watch them, they'll close back up again. Thanks very much for doing that. So we'll start off with the 500 millibar height anomaly charts. We've got the ECMWF over on the left and the GFS is on the right of your screen as you're looking at it. 500 millibars, 80,000 feet is an area of the atmosphere, high pressure, low pressure, being moved around by jet stream running above, and red extrapolates to high pressure, blue extrapolates to low pressure. What we find for the coming 8 to 10 days is that we've got a classic sort of north-south split, really. Big area of above average heights down to the south of the country, reaching in from the Azores and going in towards southern parts of Europe. That's the classic sort of summer pattern. The Azores high is ridging in to Europe anyway. We've got deep areas of low pressure though in the Atlantic, particularly in the northern part of the Atlantic, and in between you'll notice from the tight lines here we've got a pretty strong jet stream coming right through the country. Now that, perhaps as I said at the start, is unusually strong in terms of a jet for this time of the year. The GFS very similar, bringing that jet stream in across the country with the ridge down to the south and the low pressure systems up to the north of the country. So the high pressure is trying to get up from the Azores, and I think it will perhaps bring us a spell of warmer weather through the early part of next week. But with such a strong jet stream and the low pressure is fairly deep in the northern Atlantic, it's probably going to have a job to last at Azores high ridge. I think it'll very quickly be flattened off. If we have a look at the GFS temperature and precipitation ensembles, you can see that burst of warmth that we could get early next week. The red line here is the 30-year temperature average. We're going to be a bit below average actually over the coming few days, dipping down from the warmth that we had yesterday in sort of below average temperatures, and that takes us through the rest of the week. But as we get through to the weekend and early next week, see that the trend is to move those temperatures upwards. So by the early part of next week, it could be turning really quite warm indeed, just for a brief time. But you notice very quickly those temperatures do drop down again. They drop below the 30-year average, or towards the 30-year average. So yeah, I think we get a very, very quick plume of heat, perhaps around Sunday and Monday, and then quickly cooling down, and that could bring on some thunder potentially. Now the precipitation spikes are lessening off compared to what we've had over the past few days. Nevertheless, still quite a bit of precipitation coming up through the course of this week, and I think Friday for England and Wales looks particularly wet. Then it turns drier over the weekend into the start of next week, associated with that push up in the temperature, so that tells us that the Azores high is probably ridging up and warming it up for a few days, and then precipitation spikes start to come back, although they don't come back with a tremendous amount of conviction. So perhaps it won't be a thundery sort of push across the country to cool things down. It'll just be a gradual drop in temperature, maybe quite a sudden drop in temperature, but without a great deal of precipitation. Have a look at the ensemble for Manchester. That was the ensemble for London. Have a look at the ensemble for Manchester. You notice that it's a good deal more wetter. We do get that little drier spell, not completely dry, but drier spell associated with that push up in the temperatures. But overall, that's a much wetter ensemble, and I think what we're seeing there is that we're likely to have more in way of rain in the north and west as opposed to the south and the east. So you would expect that with the ridge down to the south and deep areas of low pressure to the north, you'd expect it to be wetter in the north and the west, opposed to the south and the east. I think that is what the GFS is implying. Overall, this is an unsettled pattern, I think, that we're looking at up to the middle of May. Whilst the ridge may build in and settle things down for a day or two early next week and warm it up, I think overall we are in an unsettled pattern by the look of it. The temperature anomaly is coming out near normal, really a little bit below average in the north, ever so slightly above average in the south. That will probably warm up a little bit over the next couple of days as it starts to factor in this push up in the temperature that we could get at the start of next week. This is from the 5th of May to the 13th of May, by the way. So once it starts to take out the cool temperatures that we've got at the moment, and the warmth that we may get early next week becomes more centred into the time period, then we're likely to see bits going red, only for a few days, very probably. The precipitation anomaly from the 5th to the 13th of May coming out a little bit above average in terms of the rainfall. Again, I think this will dry out a little bit as we go through the next few days. It'll be interesting to come back probably on Thursday, and I expect it to look warmer and drier then. So having a look at the generic chances for GFS for Friday, and we've got a ridge just across the country through Thursday, so I think it should be mostly dry if you're planning to go off and vote on Thursday. It should be a mostly dry day, but on Friday the next area of low pressure will be heading in, and that's going to give us an unsettled spell on Friday, particularly I think to England and Wales. There's some heavy rain around. Low pressure right over top of the country as we go through into Saturday. That's a very unsettled start to the weekend, but as we move through into Sunday, that low pressure clears off to the east, and then we get this build of pressure coming up from the south. But it is trying to ridge up that area of high pressure centred to the south of the country, and it just sort of breaks us out of that unsettled pattern for a little while. So here we are on Monday, and the high pressure is there across central parts of Europe. Notice the isobars are bringing the air up from the south, but there's still a lot of low pressure in the Atlantic, and the jet stream is still relatively strong. So this high pressure, I think its days are numbered, really. It's going to try to get in, but I think really the Atlantic is too strong. But nevertheless, for a few days early next week, this is into Tuesday, we do bring up these southerly winds, and the upper air temperatures with that really start to push up. So we go up to 10 Celsius at 850 HPA in the upper atmosphere across many parts of the country, to 15 Celsius across much of France. So that could be temperatures, say around Tuesday next week, if this comes off, easily getting up into the 20s. Could possibly get as high as 25 Celsius, that's 77 Fahrenheit for the first time this year, but it doesn't last, and as we go 24 hours on into Wednesday the 13th, the heat has been pushed away and we're back into sort of that westerly, cooler type air mass. And back to the low pressure systems as well by Wednesday, so that ridge is very, very quickly flattened off, and then the jet stream rolls back in, brings the low pressures through, and that takes us up to day 10 then, with low pressure firmly in control up to the 5th of May, keeping it, 15th of May I should say, keeping it unsettled. The ECWF is in agreement. There's the low pressure coming in for Friday and Saturday, going to give us some quite heavy rain, I think, to start the weekend, end the week, and to start the weekend. Low pressure clears east into Sunday, excuse me, and then we get this little bit of a ridge building up from the south. Very similar to the GFS by the start of next week, Monday the 11th. The high pressure is there across central parts of Europe, the low pressure is out to the northwest. Notice the flow is turning up from the south, bringing the warmth out of Spain and the Mediterranean. And that looks good for Tuesday the 12th. The high pressure is centred over Germany, low pressure is out to the west, bringing up a very warm southerly wind there. Across the country, so I think again that could push the temperatures up to 25 degrees, 77 Fahrenheit. There's the upper air temperatures telling us that the warmth is pushing northwards. But just as with the GFS, it all very quickly breaks down. The ridge isn't able to sustain itself against the Atlantic, so by 192 hours into mid of next week, that high pressure is breaking down, and the low pressure is coming back in off the Atlantic, bringing that cooler air through, and that takes us up to day 10, Friday the 15th of May, back into a cooler westerly wind, and there'll probably be bands of rain or showers coming in with that deep area of low pressure around Iceland. So I think we're we're in an unsettled pattern overall, but we could get a day or two from Sunday through to Tuesday where things settle down, particularly for England and Wales, and potentially become very warm for the time of year. If those winds do go into the south, we could push temperatures up to around 25 degrees, say around Tuesday, that's 77 in Fahrenheit. I don't think it would last more than 2 or 3 days, and then a push of westerlies brings the unsettled weather back. So perhaps classic sort of 3-5 days of a thunderstorm, which makes up generally, on average, a UK summer. It could be that type of pattern setting up over the weekend and into the start of next week. But overall, the big picture, in terms of what's happening with the Atlantic and everything else, the big picture is still pretty unsettled, really, up to middle of May. That's it for now, then, and thanks for watching.